Joining us now is investigative reporter. She's been at the forefront of so much of this, Fox News contributor, and Sara Carter is with us. He has the #1 book now, 2 weeks and running, on the New York Times bestseller list. Greg Jarrett, Fox News legal analyst. The book is The Russian Hoax, the illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton and frame Donald Trump. Welcome back to the program. Let's first talk about the news. We'll start with you, Sara, as it relates to Mr. Strzok and his now GoFundMe page. And apparently you've been spending a lot of time this weekend, and this apparently is about to all take a turn for the worse, which I've been predicting now for some time, that this is only a small portion of what we know, and you have some news on that.
Yeah, absolutely, Sean. This is only a small portion, and this is why the congressional committees are so intently going after Bruce Orr and others, and communications between McCabe and Peter Strzok. Also, there is apparently communications between Peter Strzok and Bruce Orr that people are now looking at and seeking more information on. Those have not been made public yet. So the concern here is about Peter Strzok, and he says he's going to fight the FBI on his firing. I've spoken to a number of FBI agents, some who have lost their jobs for much less, who actually quit fighting the FBI, who said they're just astonished that OPR would even suggest, that's the Office of Professional Responsibility, giving Peter Strzok 60 days of suspension for what he did. He violated every rule, every aspect of the FBI and how the Bureau handles cases. And that's the reason why he was removed from Robert Mueller's special counsel. And right now, this is probably one of the biggest problems Robert Mueller has on his hands right now. His case, because of Peter Strzok, because Peter Strzok led the investigation, his case right now is basically fruit of the poisonous tree. How is he going to be able to move forward with any kind of Trump-Russia collusion when all the people involved in the case have either been demoted, fired, or suspended? And these are the questions that Mueller is going to have to handle on the legal part.
How many people now at the FBI are we talking about, either fired, demoted, or whatever?
We have the general counsel, James Baker. He was demoted. We have the firing of Andrew McCabe, Bill Priestep, people who have left. That was the second in command. We have others inside the FBI that are now facing similar charges. It won't be long before James Baker. You also
have Strzok and Page and Comey. The list is getting, but these are all the top people, and then Bruce Orr.
That's right. The entire seventh floor. And this is probably one of the biggest problems that the FBI has right now. And Christopher Wray, as much as he wants to try to protect the FBI and the Bureau from all of this backlash, he really needs to step forward now, come out and tell the American public what happened, and then move forward.
I've not been particularly impressed with him. And, I mean, sometimes he says, a lot of cliches, and there's a lot of nicety in his speak, but I'll be honest, I mean, I'm not that impressed, to be, frank with you. And in terms of his desire to get to the bottom of this, when I speak to FBI agents and rank and file, the urgency in their voices and the outrage in their voices, is loud. It is loud and clear, and they're angry at all of this. Let's talk about this from the legal side. Greg Jarrett, congrats again on the success of the book, but, we're sitting back and we're waiting, and we hear people are fired or demoted or let go, and they're going to fight their firing, et cetera, but we haven't heard about anybody being indicted or criminal referrals at this point, but the trial of the century on Paul Manafort keeps going on.
You're right. Peter Strzok's firing was long overdue. He was escorted from the FBI building 2 months ago and stripped of his badge. All you have to do is look at the Inspector General's conclusion, in which he said that Peter Strzok's communications with Lisa Page, quote, are not only indicative of a biased state of mind, but imply a willingness to take official action to impact a presidential candidate's electoral process, end of quote. So, I agree with Sara completely. It's astonishing to me that the Office of Professional Responsibility only recommended a suspension and demotion. My goodness, that kind of conduct is deserving of termination immediately.
But everybody's given me the same question. I happen to see a lot of people this weekend, and we've been the tip of the spear, and everything we've reported has turned out to be true. And people can't believe this is as Sarah just said, the seventh floor, the infamous seventh floor, the most powerful people that we're talking about here with the worst conduct and behavior. And at what point people are asking, does this now cross the line into criminal and indictment territory? Because I think we've well past that point.
Well, it appears that Clinton was exonerated for purely political reasons, and it was Peter Strzok who sat down at his computer and expunged the incriminating language from Comey's statement to absolve Clinton. So that would constitute the felony crime of obstruction of justice. And if Strzok was involved in using the fabricated, unverified dossier not only to investigate Trump, but to obtain the warrant to spy on his campaign, that's several felonies, including abuse of power, perjury, conspiracy to defraud the government, and obstruction of justice. There needs to be a grand jury that is convened to receive and review the evidence and render indictments.
And this is the reason why, Sean, there has been such a big fight. Even Senator Lindsey Graham has called for a special counsel investigation. Everybody's been back and forth on whether or not that would be appropriate to have that, because it could take years. But the thing is, there's nobody overseeing the investigators. The DOJ is the top of the food chain here. And unless somebody from the DOJ, like Greg says, appoints a grand jury, investigates this, who will pay for this? We don't even know. And right now, the Inspector General's report, we're not even sure when that's going to come out. There is some talk now that it won't be out until next year. And that really has no teeth. So something needs to happen, and somebody needs to be appointed.
Well, I listen and I hear, what crimes have you identified, Greg? Because we've gone over some of them as it relates to Comey and others. What are the crimes here?
Well, as I mentioned, for Peter Strzok, it's obstruction of justice. If he sat down his computer and changed the language, clearing Clinton, and it was done for political reasons, and the evidence seems fairly compelling, that's obstruction of justice. And, he has insisted, Strzok, that I had nothing to do, really, with the FISA warrant. Well, he was front and center using the unverified dossier, which was used for the warrant to spy. And not only that, never believe for a moment the canard that it was Papadopoulos bar talk that triggered the Trump-Russia collusion investigation. That was a lie that was perpetrated on the New York Times to cover up the real reason for the investigation. The basis was the dossier. Now, the Papadopoulos bar talk makes no legal sense, no common sense, as I explain in the book. The dossier was used to launch the investigation. The FBI knew it was fabricated and phony. They didn't care. They were looking for an excuse, a pretense or pretext to launch the investigation to harm Trump. And, that's an abuse of power. It's conspiracy to defraud. It's obstruction of justice.
Well, let me ask you the legal point that Sara was making about how this impacts Mueller at this particular point. And that is that, all of these guys are connected to all of this, and all of this is connected to the Mueller investigation. What does that do? If I'm the defense attorney, all of this is coming up in court to me, but every challenge that has been brought up specifically about Mueller, whether or not he has jurisdiction, has been upheld by judges because of the broad mandate of Rod Rosenstein.
That's right. But there needs to be more challenges to the legitimacy, or, as I write in the book, illegitimacy of the appointment of Robert Mueller. If you read very carefully the federal regulations, it requires a specified crime. Look at the authorization order. There's no such thing in there. This is an investigation in search of a crime, which is backwards. And Sarah's right about evidence obtained improperly or illegally by people like Peter Strzok and James Comey and others. Under the exclusionary rule, which is bedrock law, anything illegally obtained cannot be used as evidence. It's excluded. So one wonders, what Robert Mueller has obtained that hasn't been tainted by illegal conduct.
Sara, I know you're taking this to a different level tonight, and I know you've been working on a report all day, and you were kind enough to share it with me. To what extent can you tell us as it relates to Strzok and Strzok's bosses here?
Well, we can just touch on the periphery. One of the things that I did want to mention to you, Sean, which I thought was significantly important, hasn't been brought out in public before, was the communications that the Congress now has between Bruce Orr and Christopher Steele. In one of the emails, this part which has not been made public yet, Bruce Orr is basically speaking to Christopher Steele back and forth in this exchange, and on September 16th, 2016, before the election, there's one email in particular where he said, I'd like to see you again in person, and therefore to coordinate diaries. Coordinate the information that they were collecting on President Trump. What does that say to you?
They want to change the date.
When the Department of Justice official is coordinating with a foreign spy to investigate an incoming presidential candidate or president? What does that say?
Let me get right back to you, and we'll ask Greg his take on it from a legal standpoint.
Listen to us live on iHeartRadio, 660 AM. The Answer.
Thank you. Sarah Carter, Greg Jarrett. All right, Sarah, let's go back to where we were and talk a little bit more about what's coming out and how deep this is going to go.
Well, I think there's a lot of questions about people that are still with the FBI and how this is being handled. There was a lot of concern among FBI agents and others about OPR, and that's the Office of Professional Responsibility, and how things were handled there. You know, Candace Will, who heads OPR, was a big supporter of Hillary Clinton. She was very close friends with Eric Holder at the DOJ. She formerly served with the Justice Department, and according to a number of sources, she had campaigned actively for Barack Obama in 2012. So for a lot of people, this basically just slap on the hand to Peter Strzok was more of a friendship. Reaching out to Peter Strzok was more of a way for Candace Will to let Peter Strzok go, to let him off the hook. And this is really enraging and angering a lot of people within the FBI. I think we need to know more about this. Why would they only give him, why would they only ask for a 60-day suspension and a demotion for such flagrant violations? Another thing is and I'd ask this question over and over again, Sean, who was it that authorized Bruce Orr to be a conduit for the FBI, and who at the FBI allowed that to happen? I mean, we have to look at maybe Peter Strzok's boss, Bill Priestap. We don't hear anything about him, and we know that, it wasn't just Strzok alone making these decisions. It was people like Bill Priestap. It was people above him like Andrew McCabe and others, and that's what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be focused a little bit on the people behind the scenes and how they were maneuvering and how they're playing this game. And I think a lot more information is going to be coming out about Peter Strzok, about his boss Bill Priestap, and about Candace Will and others at OPR, and how they've been handling the situation from the seventh floor.
And Greg, really quickly, how will lawyers be able to somehow get all of this misconduct into play as it relates to the Mueller investigation? We have about 30 seconds.
Well, I have a copy of all of the emails and text messages between Bruce Orr and Christopher Steele, and they're quite revealing. Even last August, a year ago, there's this text message, whenever convenient, we have to chat. He talks about re-engagement. This is Christopher Steele with the Bureau and Robert Mueller.
Unbelievable.
And, it goes on and on.
Well, more on Hannity tonight.